David Daneshgar?
Close.
Did I say that right?
Yeah, close. Daneshgar, but it's close.
Daneshgar.
Yeah.
Well, I got it close. And what name is that? What descent is that?
Persian. I mean, really, it's Iranian, but in today's day and age, we say Persian now.
Persian.
Yeah. But my parents are from Iran.
Okay. So for those that are tuning in, David and I had met. We both live in LA, but it took us both going to Kentucky to meet. We were out there for a mutual friend, Bob Simon's bourbon tour, and there were some pretty fascinating people on this bus. And after getting to kind of know a little bit more about David, your story was just so interesting that I wanted to bring you onto the podcast.
Awesome.
So thanks for coming up.
For sure.
So you grew up in LA?
Yeah. So I grew up in Westlake Village.
Okay.
It's about 30 miles north of LA, kind of between here and Santa Barbara.
Got it. Yep. They call that the burbs of
Yes,
LA.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
And so for those that don't know, he is a World Series of Poker champion, which we're going to get into, right? And there's not too many people that just kind of walk around with that title. And so I do want to talk a little bit about that. But as a kid, were you like a gambler? Like where did this come from?
No. So my parents, it came from Iran after the revolution.
Okay.
My dad still doesn't know how to play poker. So, but they were always very supportive, which was a big deal. But in Westlake, especially 20 plus years ago when I was in high school, it wasn't necessarily the most happening place. So a lot of us after school were interested in like statistics and probability and fun. So we would play we'd bet a lot. And that was in high school.
Statistics and probability, fun.
I think maybe a better way to explain that that people know now is we'd bet on sports.
Okay.
And we'd be like, hey, if you can do X, Y, and Z, I'll give you 3 times your money. So just for the layman terms, not to glorify it, but we were always interested in like making prop bets or always doing things that we thought were fun. But in the end, like when you tell someone, if you give me $3, if you do it, if not, you give me 1, you are kind of like, in a sense, kind of guessing risk or probability. So
got it.
But it could be anything. So I think just after school we were bored is a better way to say that. After high school, and so just kind of got into it. And one of those things was poker.
Poker, huh? So even dating back, so even going back beyond high school, so like what kind of kid were you? Like maybe like in grade school, were you into sports? What were you into?
Definitely somewhat nerdy for sure. But yeah, I mean I was talkative. Like I could definitely talk before I could walk.
Okay.
Which has helped me in the most recent ventures. But definitely in terms of like classes, I hated English and I love math.
Okay, math.
So I was very close to my family. I was lucky to have very supportive parents, my brother, and I played soccer in kind of like, when I was growing up and in high school, and loved the Lakers and kind of cliche, so to speak. I would probably say the first sense of kind of change was when I went to Berkeley. So I ended up I got lucky to go to UC Berkeley.
Okay.
And that was definitely like a different experience where I saw a different world.
So before that, tell me a little bit about your mom and dad. What kind of parents were they?
Very close, and still to this day, like I'm very close with my parents. Like, and they're very cool. I've been very fortunate. Like yesterday, I was calling my mom, and we'll get into like Whippy's like text messaging, but we were pranking people on the software.
You and your mom?
Yeah. So I'm lucky that like my mom specifically is probably still one of my best friends.
That's awesome.
And my dad is super supportive, just a very different personality. My mom is more the business side. My dad is a gastroenterologist.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a stomach doctor and very more of a listener than a talker. So I say that's closer to my brother.
Sure.
And my mom is closer to me, more of an extrovert.
So you have just one brother? That's it, the two of you? Older brother?
Younger.
Younger brother.
Yeah.
And
so the 4 of us, and very fortunately we went on vacations together, but we're very close. And so like even when the day I have a family, like I know a lot of my friends are like, well, I would do this differently, but I don't think anything my parents did. I mean, I was very fortunate. In that lottery ticket of a sense, I got very lucky.
What's your brother into?
My brother's an attorney.
Okay.
He actually does some personal injury stuff, some corporate stuff. But he's very lucky, and we are, that he recently had a daughter. And so it was like the first, obviously, grandchild on
cool.
both sides of the family. But it's just been pretty awe-inspiring to me to see a baby and get to see like the innocence and all of that. So it's been an amazing experience. And she just turned 6 months. Sienna is his daughter's name.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you get to spoil your niece, you said? Yeah.
Yes. Like it's like, and it's, I hope to have a daughter or a son myself, but it's kind of the best of all worlds because I get to go during the happy times. Once in a while, like they'll need me to change her, and I'm happy to. So I got to see that experience, but I get to see the best of it. Yeah.
So when you were like a kid, right? I think every kid was asked at one point, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I'm sure a professional poker player when you're 7 was not kind of in the cards.
Yeah. So at Westlake High, they actually had a course, I think, where you actually had cadavers. So going through that, I was like, should I follow my dad's footsteps as a doctor?
Sure.
So my dad is more the doctor. My mom is more the business side. And so I kind of thought, I'm going to be I wasn't like, I'm going to be a firefighter. I'm going to be a movie star. I kind of thought I'd be a doctor.
Okay.
But very quickly, I'm sure, I don't know if some of the people kind of relate to this, but I started getting into baseball cards a lot.
Okay.
Buying them, going to trade shows, selling them, love to collect them. And so I think that, and also I was the same type of kid who lived near a golf course. I'd buy golf balls. I'd go to Costco, buy coffee, mark them up, go. I quickly realized, like, in high school, like, I was going to be, it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And so what was is like the entrepreneurial side and being your own boss. So that's kind of how I kind of grew up. So it was very quickly in high school when I was looking at the live cadavers and I was seeing people excited, and I was just thinking about, like, how can I flip my baseball cards to make more money? I think that kind of already started to signify the direction I'd go.
That's so fascinating. So if a friend of mine, big sports bettor, he goes by Vegas Dave. Dave Wancha is his name. He's going to be a guest on the show here soon too. He got his start in baseball cards too, right? And he was just doing things that were so kind of like not that an 11-year-old or 12-year-old would think of, where he would his dad would take him to like where the hotel that the professional teams were playing, right?
Oh, wow.
And so he'd sit down there waiting with his baseball cards, right? And then he'd see like Larry Bird walk in, right? And Larry, little young kid, can you sign this baseball card, right? And then from there, obviously the value of the baseball card goes way back up, right? And so it's so interesting that, gambling, the connection at such a high level today kind of starts just with an interest in baseball cards.
I will touch on one thing. So as we'll kind of find out, I think a little bit different than other people that went into professional poker. Like, I never had the illusion that I'd do that forever. And even when I was interested, I was always more interested in the business. So I mean, we'll get to that chapter soon, but I know some people who are doing it, and like from day one, I thought about it as an interesting challenge, but frankly, more like something that I knew, like people play golf now. You could always do it when you're retired.
Sure.
And you can be a really good player, but I never minced the idea that it would be something that I would do forever.
Got it. Well, it's a good skill to have for sure, right? Regardless of whatever you do with your life. So you graduated high school. You said you got into Berkeley and went to Berkeley. Were there other colleges that you applied for that you got into?
Yeah, but I think I remember it. I mean, I was from LA, so the two that I was really excited about was UCLA and Berkeley. I didn't really apply to that many out-of-state schools, and I think for myself, like, I was actually more interested, like, in having grown up and my family being in Westwood, and so I ended up getting accepted to Berkeley and not to UCLA. Okay, and I think for that one day, I was like bummed, but then I went to go visit Berkeley's campus, and as you'll learn, it was just like, it was a phenomenal experience for me that really changed me.
So now you're a freshman in Berkeley. You kind of have an interest in business from kind of growing up, and you were doing some poker and stuff in high school. So tell me a little bit more about, your experience you taught a class in Berkeley, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay, so probably rewind till we get to that point. But like when I got to Berkeley, I think the cool thing was that it wasn't just the school; it was a city too, and so got to meet a lot of interesting people. But the way people thought was different, and so one of the things that I caught on to was that there was two students. There was something called a decal class, and decals where students could teach classes if they could prove that there was educational experience. That's probably questionable. So there was a class on Seinfeld, believe it or not.
A class on Seinfeld.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, but these are student-run classes, so it's like it's pass, not pass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then there was a class, and then I took a class on blackjack card counting, believe it or not.
Okay.
Again, this is Berkeley, so it was very different. But I thought, oh, this is awesome. I'm pretty interested in poker. I would love to teach a class on poker. So I went to go to apply, and it got rejected. So probably one of the things you'll get with everyone is resilience. So my last year, I was like, I'm getting more interested in poker. There was a casino out there, and I seemed to be doing okay. And this is right before, believe it or not, this is the same quarter that Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker in 2003. He hadn't won it yet.
Okay.
And it just happened to be that the class I was doing was that exact time where poker boomed.
Okay.
And so it hadn't boomed yet. And so I was really interested and went back with a bag of bagels. And I said, I'm going to go find a math professor and show them the statistics behind it. And luckily that last quarter before I left, the last semester, they approved it. So my last semester, I got to teach, it was actually called Probability and Statistics of Gaming. It wasn't called poker.
Okay.
But yeah, I was there, and the most important lesson I can tell you about that experience is that you learn quickly when you have to structure things. So I had all these thoughts, but they weren't structured.
Sure.
And starting next week, I had to teach a class. So very quickly, and at that point it was just VHS. I had to order VHS videos. I had to put my own curriculum together. And by doing that, I actually kind of learned how to structure my thoughts on poker. That helped a lot.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's funny that they have it's okay to have a card counting class, but not a statistics class, right? So my president of Hennessey Digital, our agency, went to MIT. And, obviously MIT has the very famous
Poker
story,
team. Sorry,
right?
blackjack team. Right?
Blackjack, yeah, that's different. I'm blackjack, yeah. I was actually, ironically, in the movie 21.
No way.
Yeah, I played a DJ. I ended up getting cut out. So like after spending like 8 hours on set and making $50, right? I'm thinking like, hey, this is my claim to fame, and go to the movie theater, watch it, bring all my friends, and they're like, we can't even see you. And so anyway, that was a big letdown. But that was pretty fascinating, because I think, they teach that class in MIT, but then they say that you can't go and use it at casinos, right? It's like illegal?
Yeah, so card counting, I mean, I don't know all rules, but I know one thing is, I don't know how it's illegal. There's some rule that says if you have an unfair advantage on a casino.
Yeah.
I mean, common thought would be like, well, you have an unfair advantage when I play every hand.
Exactly.
So there's a lot kind of about that. I mean, not to deter, but I think one of the most interesting cases that you can read about was Phil Ivey recently. Like they withheld $20 million from hotels because he was playing, I think it was Paigao. It's a little bit different. He did something called, it was basically on the edge of cards, their perforations, and he was with a lady who could memorize those.
Wow.
And so he ended up beating, they didn't know because it was a high net wealth individual and he loves to gamble, but I think he'd won something like $20 or $30 million, and it's in court now. Like, is that unfair? It was the casino that put those cards out, not him.
Sure.
So there's a lot of stuff on what is considered unfair advantage.
Interesting.
But I think I did it more just to like, I thought it was cool and to get to know people when I took that class. But once I was the student, it was pretty quick. I said, you know what, this is awesome. Maybe I'm interested in poker. I can do the same next year.
I could teach a class. So another quick story about poker for me. So way early on in my career, probably dating back to probably like around the same time with the Chris Moneymaker stuff, I was doing SEO for Ultimate Bet.
Yes.
And Ultimate Bet and Poker, I can't remember the other one. Ultimate Bet, There's another one. And so my whole job was basically keeping us ranking number 1 for the keyword online poker, right? And there's some crazy strategies that I think we talked about, even when we were back in Kentucky. But that was such a fascinating and ultimate, absolute poker and ultimate bet. Those were the two. And we had them ranking like number 1 and number 2, and then Phil Ivey's Poker Stars. Was that the other one?
There was, at the time, Phil Ivey was Full Tilt Poker.
Full Tilt, okay.
Then there was Party Poker and Poker Stars. Actually.
Poker Stars was the other one, yeah. And I remember seeing them and reverse engineering all their SEO strategies back in the day, because it was such a big difference in profit to be ranking number 1 on Google for that term. But then I remember very clearly, I was in Vegas and I woke up one morning and my text messages were blowing up, and like every single website the FBI had seized. Yeah. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was called Black Friday.
Black Friday.
I remember because, it was after, I think it was after I won the World Series of Poker, and I was already kind of like, I'm on thinking about the next thing, but that totally changed poker. Like, because what happened during Black Friday is, you'd have to look this up, but I believe there was, believe it or not, a terror bill at the time. Okay. Something like that. And someone in Congress or Senate snuck a clause in there that had to do with payments and processing, because it could go to someone that you don't want to, and poker fell under that. So it was kind of like, it really changed poker, because at that point in time, if you can't get money into accounts, like the fish, the bad players, they need a quick fix, right? And they can't get it anymore. So it ended up eventually being pros against pros, and then by the time that momentum kind of ceased, it wasn't able to kind of catch back up. So that whole series where the sites went down really changed, I think, the landscape of poker.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No warning, nothing. It was just like, boom. It was like shut down. Like, what do you do? And that was a big account for me, obviously. So it hit me financially at the time, but it hit so many other people. Like, my problems were just so micro compared to like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
So, so what was one of the most rewarding parts about like teaching that class and working with students?
Well, I think so going back to kid, as I said a little bit, I wasn't shy, but definitely like I hadn't had a platform. And I think it like when I go to the future and we talk about like companies and teams, I think educating people and finding digestible ways to do that is like imperative for anyone. Like if you want to grow a company, even a customer, like right now as I onboard customers, you have to speak their language. So some of them you may have to be technical, some of them you may have to be like just like mano a mano. But I think I learned that everyone kind of learns at different paces, and you have to kind of figure that out. So that was very rewarding. And the other thing that was very rewarding, as you'll tell, is that as I actually had to put this stuff and teach people, I was teaching myself. And at that point in time, there weren't a lot of people. As the class ended in May, it was that summer that Chris Moneymaker won the World Series. So when you have this rush of people, it was fortuitous that like right at that same time, I'd already thought through strategies. So that ended up becoming very helpful for the next couple of years.
And so were you, you weren't a professional poker player at that time, were you? Because you're still in college, right?
No, and I wasn't after. After college, I graduated and I was like, what should I do? And so I worked at Countrywide, which is kind of may have been one of the chips or dominoes in the financial crisis. But I wasn't really fulfilled. I was like, okay, this is cool, but like I was still thinking about poker. And so when I graduated and I was there, I was still going to the casino sometimes at night times. And I just kind of realized one specific day they had a tournament at Hollywood Park, and I went to play it. And I remember I was out till like, and I think I was living back home at this point, like till 3 a.m. And I was like, oh, I was playing it, and I won. And I think, I mean, obviously it's a sizable amount, but I think at that point I won like what I would have got paid 3 or 4 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think I won like $15,000 for this tournament.
Wow.
And so I remember I was 3 a.m. and I just graduated, so I was back at home. And I remember getting in, and my mom, the business side, goes, says, "What are you doing at 3 a.m.? What are you doing out? You know what I mean? Like you're up to no good."
Yeah.
And she could see I was a little nervous, and I said, "Oh, I played a poker tournament." And she's like, "What happened?" So I kind of showed her the money, and I was like waiting to see what happens.
Yeah.
And my mom, to her credit, is like, "So can you do that again?"
Not the answer you probably were thinking she was going to give you, huh?
Yeah, but it shows me that, like, you know, she I think she in her heart already knew that it's something that, you know, I talked to her about what I did at Berkeley and stuff. And so when people think of poker, sometimes they confuse it with blackjack or roulette.
Yeah.
But you're playing against other people. You're not playing against the casino.
That's true.
So, and at that time versus now, it could be repeated quite often. It was the people are not playing it correctly. So I think that kind of started the next chapter.
So I think this is a rhetorical question, right? Because obviously you taught a class on statistics, but having a math background is definitely gives you a competitive advantage on the table.
Yeah, I mean, so I wasn't actually a math major. I liked math. I was an econ and business major, but I think there were a couple things that I used to tell people. So, like in poker, like knowing the math is helpful. It's pretty important, but it's not, if you know the math. So that's the first level.
Yeah.
The second level is psychology, because you have to try to think a little bit about why are people doing this. And so I think that's even a more important level. So if 100 people can do math, I think 10 people can take it to the next level and understand, like, the psychology behind poker, game theory, or why is this person leaning for, what are they trying to portray? It's like a story. And then I think only 1 out of 100, you know, have the fortitude to do anything about it. So it's difficult, because in that moment, your math's lined up. You're pretty sure everything's telling you this person's, you know, going a certain way, but do you have the courage to pull the trigger?
Yeah.
Especially when, like, it can be a house, you know, it can be a car. So you have to somehow, like, think of it as monopoly money.
Yeah. It's not real money.
Yeah, but I think if you can do all those, at least at my time, so this is like 10 years ago. I mean, poker's changed a lot since then. I think that was a really good recipe for being successful.
Interesting. And so, you know, you see these professional poker players, right? There's a strategy definitely happening, right, within the whole table. How often, like just percentage of the time, do the professionals bluff?
You know, I think that there's the actual correct answer is it's depending on the situation. So I think I always like to put this in like the real world. But it's like, how often does someone exaggerate that they're going to be there on time? Maybe let's just take it to a totally different level.
Yeah.
If they're a nice person and you're accepting of it, they're probably going to do it more. If it was a strict teacher, they did it less. So it really depends on your audience. So the better way to say this is, if you're at a poker table and most people are conservative, you're going to bluff more.
Okay.
If you're at a poker table where everyone's wild and crazy, you're actually going to probably bluff less. So it's really, if you're playing it correct, there's no set formula. It's a dynamic game like life, you know?
Got to read your audience.
That's true.
David's revealing some of his personal strategies here on this podcast. I love it. All right. So you won your first tournament. All right. Mom gave you the blessing to move forward.
After my bar mitzvah, this was the next blessing.
So what happens next? You're hooked, huh?
I mean, I was intrigued. And so after a couple more tournaments, I kind of said, you know what? I didn't have that much money to my name. I was just like, I'm going to go find another job that's not fulfilling. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to just, you know, give this a try to see what can happen. And so what started like that, like, definitely turned into a couple more tournaments where I just thought, like, it couldn't be chance, you know? And so I remember specifically that same year, I was like, to my brother, I was like, you know what would be really cool is to go travel and play poker. And so there was a tournament in Barcelona, and I said, let's go for it. Let's go for that tournament.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a bigger tournament. There was maybe like $1,000, and at that point, the highest I'd played is like 100 or 200 or 300.
Okay.
And I remember I just kept losing, and I kept losing, and so I was down to, if you started with, you know, $1,000 in chips, I was down to $80.
Okay.
I was demoralized. And so in poker, a lot of times for the bigger tournaments, they have dinner breaks. So I remember telling my brother, let's just get out of Spain. Like, this poker's not for me. It was a good run, but I really wanted to try it in a bigger tournament. And I tried a couple, and I was like, maybe I'm not that good, you know? And I think that's life. Like, I know we'll talk about failure and stuff, but I think adversity is a big thing that doesn't get highlighted as much.
Sure.
But that tournament, I came back, and I think probably luck more than anything, but things started to turn around, and I ended up winning that tournament. And I remember how much things changed. It was like, it's like a ripple in a pond. And
after you told your brother that, hey, I'm ready to give up, you ended up winning it.
Very quickly. I was like, I mean, this is after, I was like, okay, we'll just do this as a hobby. I ended up winning it. So I won a larger sum amount of money at that point that was very significant to me. We went out for dinner, and my brother Stevie was there in Barcelona with me. And I remember coming back, and I was like, okay, I'm going to really give this a try. So that was one time where I was literally one hand away from probably not being able to continue that path. So
giving up.
Sometimes, like, as crazy it is, it's just some of it's luck as well.
So you won that tournament, came back home. Mom said, "Can you do it again?" Right? Like, you're internationally now, right? A star.
Yes, taking it out.
And so you're like, okay, great. I'm just gonna kind of pursue this here and see where it takes me. And how old are you? How old are you at the time?
I mean, definitely early 20s. So
okay.
20. I think at this point, probably 22, 23.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I did commit, like, it was like, I'm going to do this full time for a year. Because after Barcelona, I had a decent amount. I remember I came back and won something at Commerce, where, by the way, just to throw out a shout out, that's where I met one of Bob Simon's best friends, Morrow. So Morrow, who we'd met on our trip to Kentucky, just showing how long I've known him. I was like 23, and Morrow, and that thing made the final table, and still 17 years later, he's never made another final table.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So talk about fate, right? So he became one of my best friends, and how I actually got connected with personal injury. But like, I came back to Commerce and I won that tournament, and then in 2006, I just had like a great run. And at one point, I was ranked like number 2 in the world in poker. And I think at the end of the year in 2006, I was like number 5. And I won several tournaments, and that was like a life-changing year for me, for sure.
So that's 2006, you said?
Yeah.
And so how do you even get to play in the World Series of poker?
So I hadn't won the World Series yet.
Okay.
2006, I'd probably played one or two of the tournaments in the World Series and had no luck, but I'd won a tournament so then I won a big tournament in the Bellagio in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And then I won a tournament at the Bicycle Casino. So I just started kind of like going around and putting a bankroll together, meeting a lot of cool people along the way. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm really going to give this a run. And that year is when I finished top 5.
Top 5. And okay, so that's 2008 now.
2006.
2006 still. Yeah. Okay, great. And so but when was the first year that you played in the World Series?
Probably that year. Actually.
2006. Yeah. Okay, and you didn't end up at the final table that year.
No, and to clarify, the World Series of Poker has a series of different tournaments.
Okay.
So there's the main event, which has like a ginormous, and then there's several events that lead up to that.
Okay.
So I think at that year I had played 2 of the preliminary, and then I think that year I tried the main event as well.
Got it.
But no final table.
No final table. 2007 had some luck as well.
So I think this is a good place to kind of, I think, talk about like adversity, right? So 2007 I started playing a little bit poorly.
Okay.
Because what ended up happening as in life is you have some luck and you don't adjust and you think you're invincible. And so I definitely had this series of months where I was actually losing, not winning, because I was trying to outplay everyone. So it's like in basketball, someone gets on the court and just starts trying to dribble, not pass.
Yeah.
And so it's like fancy play syndrome maybe, which is like, I know that you don't have the best hand, so I'm just going to push all in, but you still call and you should have folded. So you're a bad player. But a really good player would know that you wouldn't have folded anyway. So I think there was some fancy play syndrome, which got turned around, but definitely in that year, there was definitely some doubts again. Like, okay, was I just lucky again? And so I think in 2008, that's when I decided to play the game correctly, back to where I was. But also one good thing about 2007, which you have adversity, is I knew that like if I do get back to where I want to get back to, poker for me was a great game for networking, great skill to have, but it wasn't the say all be all. And so I had already told myself, should I go and do something great, I had already committed myself to checking that mark off the box and moving on to what I thought was even more interesting, which was business, probably a year before it happened.
Okay. And that's an interesting story too, which I want to come to here. Because BloomNation, did that happen before you won the World Series?
Oh, no, after.
That's after. Okay, so let's continue down this journey here. So 2008, you have a good year. You're probably top ranked in the world again, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I wasn't as ranked as high as
Okay.
I was in 2006, because
Yep.
2006, but 2008 is when finally I won one of the World Series poker tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
My family flew out there. My mom flew out there. My brother.
Yeah.
And I think once I won that tournament, like it was almost like, okay, I now did what I needed to do.
Yeah.
So
Was that the main event that you
no,
won? It was not
no.
the main event.
It was
okay.
actually the one right before the main event.
Okay, got
So
it.
it was still pretty challenging. There was, I think in my tournament, there's 2,500 people.
Sure.
So it's crazy. Like you're up against like a mini stadium.
Wow.
But that's when I said, okay, I did it. And so I knew that the following year I was actually going to make a change and still play poker, but kind of like you rode that high and kind of like level off, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting just to kind of think about that. A lot of people that are even good at poker, they have like leaks, right?
Mm-hmm.
They go to play craps, they go to play other stuff. But I never was ever interested in that. Like, because I didn't get the same rush that I would in poker.
Yeah.
Like reading someone and analyzing someone. So I was fortunate enough to like take that next step, and not as a result of going south,
Yeah.
but a result of just like growing as a person, I guess you could say. So it was in 2009 where I was like, I'm going to figure out what's next.
Yeah.
And to take one step back, which is an interesting segue, kind of in 2007, 2008, I met a lot of cool people in poker, but I happened to play a one-on-one tournament in that year.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the highlights was I got paired up with Jerry Buss, who's the owner of the Lakers, who passed away. And it was a best of three. You'd have to, whoever won, best of three.
Yeah.
So what do you think I do when you're sitting across, and at that point he was the owner of the Lakers, and the Lakers were hot.
And you're a fan your whole life, right?
Fan
Yeah.
my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there across from, and he knew me before, but we really got a chance to know each other, so I totally slowed the game down. So this person next to me is waiting to play the winner, and I decided to make the game versus Dr. Buss last 5 hours.
Yeah. Because you can do that.
Yeah, I could do it. And I think the reason I mentioned that is after that, I was lucky enough to get invited to the games.
Mm-hmm.
And so a funny story is when I'm trying to figure out what's next,
Yeah.
I had asked this gentleman named Ed, who was his right hand, hey, I want to ask Dr. Buss a question. I want to talk about my future. Can I come have lunch and come to his house?
Mm-hmm.
And so they invited me, and it was like a table, and Jerry Buss is there, and I'm there, and they're serving us sandwiches. And he said, well, what's on your mind? And I said, look, I love poker. I had a great education. But I think, like, I'm trying to think of what's next, and I think maybe a path to being the general manager of the Lakers would be a good idea.
Why not? Go for it, right?
Go for it. Go big or go home.
Okay. So did he kick you out of his house?
No. He liked me in terms of poker too much. So he was very quick to say that his family was going to probably be doing that. But he's like, was there anything else I can do? And I said, well, because he went to USC and he was big in business. You know, he owned a lot of real estate. I know there's a show now actually about it that people are watching. But I was telling him about business school, and they agreed to write my letter recommendation. So
Who else do you want to write that letter, right?
No. So that kind of segues the next chapter. But before BloomNation happened, I decided to go to business school.
Okay.
Because what I'd heard from a lot of friends, and it's questionable if it's worth it, so I can talk about that later. But like when you come from poker, you know what you talked about, the bus, or someone at our school was an NFL player, or someone actually went to space, whatever it is, if you want to kind of do a dramatic change, they've always kind of mentioned to me that business schools and getting your MBA was a good segue. And
Sure.
so that's when I applied to business school.
Okay. Got it. And so where'd you go to business school?
So, being the poker player I was, I was pretty efficient. I'd actually hired like a business school consultant,
Okay.
which was someone who like really helped you prep, help you take some of the manual work out of the process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they would help me craft my story and really just like most importantly, learn my interests and point me to which schools they thought could be the best and tell me to go talk to these professors. A pretty nifty business. But I decided just to, if it was going to be worth it, to apply to the best schools. So I got waitlisted at Stanford, and that was kind of Stanford's where I wanted to go because I was interested in business. But I ended up getting accepted to the University of Chicago. And so I always lived. I was in San Francisco. I was in LA. I was like, Chicago's going to be cold. Mm-hmm. But it was one of the best business schools, and so ended up going to Chicago Booth.
Okay. So at school, you're at now learning about business at a more advanced level. You've never had a business yet, right? Up until this point,
no,
besides your baseball card business back in the day, right?
Yeah, there was some small businesses I'd done in the poker world, but nothing large. And again, it's just like crazy about adversity. You get back there and you just got from playing a poker game, and you're like, I'm going to the next level.
Yeah.
And wow, that first year did I have kind of like a crash, because you go from that high to like having to learn accounting again, having to learn about stuff. And so there was definitely a point in the first year when I was talking to people close to me. So Chicago's known to be really heavy in finance and consulting. And so I was surrounded by those people, and I would go visit those companies, and I was getting recruited a lot, given my background for like finance companies.
Sure.
But it was semi-depressing, to be honest with you. You came from a world where it was your own, and so I did contemplate, like, should I drop out of business school in that first year? But what kept me going, and what I realized is that there was a program where you could actually run your own, like a business school competition. And at that point in time, like a lot of now big companies came out of that competition. Like one was Grubhub, where people order food and a bunch of stuff. And so I kind of stuck with it. And once I found the entrepreneurial path, and one of my best friends growing up who was in LA, he had actually come up with the idea of BloomNation, and he was talking to myself and one of his other best friends about, hey, this can be a real idea. That summer between my first and second year in business school, where most people go like volunteer at a bank and sell their soul, so to speak. Yeah. I was walking around to flower shops to see if it was a viable idea. And so that's when we kind of committed to doing it. Okay. And then that totally changed my direction in business school. Like you were going to a class that was marketing, and you could bring your actual concept there. And there was a class on how to raise money. And so I always thought, like same with poker, I always thought if you're conceptually learning something that you're not actually executing or implementing, it's boring. It's not like you can read poker books all you want, but if you don't get on the table, I think you're wasting your time.
Same thing with business, yeah.
Exactly. So when I was going to business school, and most of my friends were like doing mock classes. Sure. When we were talking about raising money, I was going to the professor and be like, well, this is my business, and actually we had interest already. Here's how I'm thinking about raising money. And it just changed how I looked at business school. Yeah. Because I had a real business that we were running through business school. And so you have that business school competition, and you start with like 100 companies, but they give you some money and you get to be in front of investors. And we were one of the winners. I think we were third or second place. We didn't win first place, but it was enough to kickstart the business. The business. Yeah. Got it. So that was kind of, yeah. So
you had like an MVP, I guess, if you will.
So that's a good question. So normally you have an MVP, but like at this point in time, so maybe I'll touch on what BloomNation was.
Yeah,
so
please.
My partner at the time, Farbod, his aunt was a local florist, and he'd come from an investment banking background. And so he thought that the way you order flowers is like you either call a local florist, but you don't have all these local florists in one place, or you have to go through like Teleflora or 1-800-Flowers, and like you can't see what you're buying. And so there's a total misconnection there. So like if you want to go to one place, like an Airbnb for flowers now, or like an Etsy for flowers, so you can order anywhere in the country, it didn't exist. Like Teleflora did, but the photos you saw, it was just a broker, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so that kind of started BloomNation as that marketplace for people to go and order from anywhere in the country.
Got it. And I come from the wedding business myself.
Yes.
I was a DJ for so long, right? I speak at the wedding MBA every year, right? So I deal and interact with these florists. So you started with the technology first, and then from there you went and got your first floor. Well, I guess it might have been his aunt's business first, right?
That's a good question. Yeah. Because now I can always talk about how we do things differently now at the next venture. Yeah. But I think we kind of started alongside with florists. Okay. So there's good and bad in that. But it's always good to be able to talk. And that was my job, to go find these florists, and it was a crazy adventure. Back to the poker world, like you had no fear in poker. I know there were several times that you have to get things done in the beginning. One of my biggest tips in this whole podcast is, if you really want to start a big business, you have to do things that are not scalable. Like I went into that shop and the guy said no.
Okay.
I went in again and he said, get out of here. The third time he said, I'm calling the police. And now he's actually one of our best friends.
Is that right?
And suggests people, but like starting a business is not easy.
No.
So it was you have to be pretty like poker. You can't get on tilt maybe. But we went around and we did that and like built it alongside some florists. Built this marketplace, but that didn't end up becoming our biggest product. What we realized when we were helping the florists is like, wow, they need a marketplace, and this is more your world even, but wow, they need a website, they need marketing tools, they need SEO, they need something that has like delivery tracking. There was just a whole platform that I think we needed to build, and so that became BloomNation.
Got it. And so you started to develop this. It was completely bootstrapped at first.
That's a good question. So it was bootstrapped. I think we were in a fortunate situation where my two partners, Greg and Farbod, they came from like banking, so they had a little cash, and I just came from poker. So we didn't start it with an engineer. So we started by going to like an outsourced agency, and that kind of presented its own challenges. So we had to put a lot of money in the beginning, a couple $100,000 together.
Okay.
But once we started seeing that and we met some investors, we were fortunate enough to meet some really good investors, but we had to start it with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. Which, when I started my next venture right now, I tried it a very different way, which we'll talk about probably later.
Yeah. So one of the fascinating stories is how you were able to kind of leverage your poker skills to raise some seed capital for this venture. But then what's even more brilliant than that is how you then leverage that for publicity and PR.
Yes,
that was the kind of stuff that I'm like, I got to have David on my show.
What was coincident? I mean, good. So before we had to put a couple $100,000, but back up, we had to start with $30,000.
Yep.
And so to get like the outsourced company to like do our proof of concept. And so when we we were thinking, how are we going to do this? And I happened to be still in the poker mindset, even back from business school. And I hadn't played for a while, but I saw Commerce had a tournament that day. It was $1,000 buy-in. It was 100 players. First place was like $30-something thousand. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense. Let's just split this. And if we win, we're in, so to speak. And so one of my partners was a little conservative. And I remembered, he was joking. He's like, you know what, if they send us a limo, because we got to work on the way, we're working. Yeah. And so I knew someone at Commerce and they agreed. Okay. So I was like, they're sending a limo. So we sat at a poker table and I started playing, and they were next to me doing the design for the website. And so that tournament, 100 down to 80, finally down to 5. Once it was 5, they kind of stopped working and they were crowding around. And when it was down to 2 people, I remember this vividly. The last hand we went all in, and I had 2 pairs, and my competitor had 1 pair, but he didn't realize it. So he started celebrating with his crowd, and I could see them, and they're like, we didn't have the $30,000. It was their mentality. We fell short. Yeah. And I remember kind of the quote that they took, but what was kind of real was I said, don't worry, boys, it's flower time. and so the guy came back, my competitor, and he basically misread my hand. And so that was the first $30,000, and just kept blossoming from there. So
cool. And if you Google that story, there's press all over the place about it, right? So because you leveraged that.
Yeah. So about the SEO. So Greg at the time, he was more knowledgeable about SEO, and we happened to have a publicist because he was all like, backlinks are going to make a difference, high authority backlinks, all that stuff. And so the publicist kind of ran with that. And I remember we had a publicist, and she's like, we're going to go to New York. And I remember my partner at the time, the CFO, was like, she can only go to New York if she gets you several desk sites. So she's like, David, I'll get it. And so it sounds like a lot, but she booked like 12 desk sites on one trip. And it was like, we went to like Fox News, we were at People Magazine, Time Magazine, Forbes. And I was like, wow, okay, this story really resonates. And so it really did make a big difference in terms of like getting that story out.
Yeah, and so from people that are listening that don't follow SEO, right? So when you get publicity like that and they link back to BloomNation.com, you get the authority that passes over, and that kind of accelerates your Google rankings and your whole business.
Yeah.
So that's why I really personally admire that. So then from there, then you guys went on, and I'm making a longer story short, you then raised like real capital then after that.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think the way, just for people that are viewing, so first 30K came from that. We got like the first version of our software.
Yeah.
Obviously it didn't do the job. Like outsourcing, especially back then when there wasn't as many different platforms, whether you want to call Shopify or all these different stuff, we used Magento. So so then we put some money ourselves, and then when we came back, just a lot of cool stories. Like actually, I think it was Bill Gurley. He didn't invest, but he was on Benchmark Capital, the same one that was on the board at like Uber, the one where they had that issue where he was fighting with the CEO.
Yeah.
He walked into our office and he's like, "This is pretty awesome, but here are the changes I'd make." And one of them was that you need to give them more tools. Like you need to put their picture at the front. You need to give them software. And if you do that, which now we know because everyone makes their own Shopify store, if you give them the tools to empower themselves, that will be a good business. And so we ended up doing that and seeing traction. And we raised $1.5 million soon after from and we got lucky, like really good investors like Andreessen Horowitz, Spark Capital, big names that I was shocked that we're investing in a seed round.
I see. So back while you were doing that, I had a wedding directory. I had multiple wedding directories. One was called Los Angeles Wedding Mall. I had Seattle Wedding Mall. I had Phoenix Wedding Mall, right? I had all these directories, right? And I had a sales team that was kind of dialing for dollars and calling the same florists that you were calling at the time too. And so I had this vision of kind of building out a massive wedding directory. And so at the time, Zappos had just moved from San Francisco, I believe, to Vegas. And so I seen it on the news, and so I just randomly sent an email to Tony, right, the CEO of Zappos, rest in peace. And he actually responded back to me, right? And so, like in life, right, you have to kind of take action to get results, right? Heck, we could be talking right now, and you could be the general manager of the Lakers, right? You took the action, you took the shot, right?
Yeah, you have to take the shot.
And so I just randomly emailed him, and he then connected me with a guy named Fred Mosler, and then who then connected me with Alfred Lin. And so they're like, "Hey, come on down. Love to meet with you," right? And so here I am, some young 22-year-old kid with a vision. And I got invited down, and they gave me like this whole VIP treatment, and I was brought into the office with freaking Tony, Fred, and Alfred, who now works. He's like at Sequoia Capital, right? And so, what are you here for? And I'm like, well, I've got this vision, I've got this idea, and so I messed up because my whole vision was kind of monetizing wedding vendors. Right. And so my idea was like, if I can get a florist to pay us $99 a month to advertise here, and if I could pay, get a DJ in this market and build out, I was this close away from getting like Zappos to invest in the business. But what they didn't like is that I didn't see the opportunity to actually monetize the brides. That wasn't really my pitch. I was more kind of in tune and trying to monetize all the vendors globally and creating this marketplace. And so they politely declined, but the fact that I was able to get there was pretty is awesome.
And who was, I'm trying to think, was the winner in that type of world, like Thumbtack, or was that?
Thumbtack was the big one, and then another one came was a company called Wedding Wire. They kind of came, and they were more of the technology kind of focused company, and then Wedding Wire ended up acquiring the Knot. So they actually own them now. Awesome. So. But anyway, that was my story. So then, back to BloomNation. So you now you raised a couple $1 million, and then you just continue to grow. Were you the CEO, or what was your title?
I was I guess in the beginning, kind of like head of sales and business development, but my role ended up becoming the chief revenue officer, so CRO.
Okay, got it.
So we had CEO Farbod, who I mentioned, kind of thought of the idea. And he was more focused just on our responsibilities, more on the product and kind of, I guess you call the vision of the product. I was more. I guess I was more interested. I was more responsible in terms of getting money, right? So whether it was like, getting people to purchase the software, talking to partners on like, companies that could potentially integrate with us, and like really building out. Probably one of my favorite things was building out a team. And so kind of similar maybe to how you have it now. You had to go from, I think, 1 to 100.
That's
and
right.
And like, how do you build a sales force, and how do you build it so everyone's kind of firing on all cylinders? So that was kind of my focus.
Okay. Yeah, it comes down to, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes because you've never done it before, right?
Yeah.
And then you just kind of learn from the mistakes, and that's kind of how you grow. And so fast forward now, BloomNation, still a business. Do you still have equity in that company?
Yeah, no, it's very successful. So I think I actually happened to go to the office. So I left the company 2 years ago, and I can talk about that too. But I was on the board in the beginning, and now I'm just kind of, I guess you just call it a shareholder, maybe friendly advisor.
Yeah.
But no, don't have any real active role. I still get hit up every day from people with coupon codes or florists, which was great about the relationship. Like, I need help here. Yeah. But it's kind of like dating. Yeah. I mean, still have a really good relationship with my old partners, but it's like when you're in it, that's my mentality. It's how I've always been. When you're in it, you're in it. Like when you're in poker, you're in poker. But the second you decide now it's time for the next, I think you just have, like, poker gives you that skill, right? Because you have to somehow detach yourself from a loss or a win. Sure. You can't have a win and go crazy. You can't have a loss and let it drown you. That's right. So I think once you're in it, and you're like hooked. And the second you decide you're not, it's like almost like you can just detach.
I see.
So so I ended up just becoming, and even currently, just rooting for them. I think they're probably heading towards 200 people. Wow. So I think 150 people. They rebranded. So the company is actually now called the Promenade Group, because the biggest thing we were trying to tackle towards the end was that we were doing really well with the floor industry, but once you start raising a lot of money, I think they raised, probably north of $25 million. You have to bring your investors a return. Sure. A high growth return. And so I think they're in now kind of like, how do we bring the same software to like supermarkets, liquor stores, pizza shops, stuff like that.
Wow, okay.
So they've kind of rebranded, and BloomNation is just one part of that multifaceted SMB approach.
And so when do you know it was time for you to kind of transition out? Yeah,
so I think in that case, it wasn't as easy just to leave, but there was definitely parts where I wasn't, I guess to kind of say this, but either you weren't being challenged, you weren't giving it your all, or you weren't enjoying yourself as much. And so I'm kind of a polarizing person in that sense. And so I think there was some adversity we faced actually, like in 2016, 2017, where the company like literally almost went under. And so I remember there was a point where we didn't really manage our, you raise money and, throwing parties. I mean, I would definitely not like WeWork, but like we had a party, actually probably a smart party, because Greg always made us have to return more money at a party than we spent. Yeah. So it would be like vendor parties, you know what I mean? And it was all exciting, but I think, eventually that just fire didn't burn, I guess. And I think one of the reasons is as we grew and we raised more money and it was like 100 people, you didn't know people by name. And more importantly, for me, it became a little bit more bureaucratic. Like, those, what do you call wild ones, I guess, where it's like, I want to get this done. Yeah. Even though you got to go to this chain of command and that chain of command, and you have, I think I just wasn't running on all cylinders anymore. And so I think there was a time where I realized that. The thing was, once I realized that, it was probably a year, if not more, maybe a year and a half till I left. Because this is your baby and you have millions of dollars in equity, right? And so you want to see that through, so you're so incentivized as well. And plus, your best friends are some of the people you started it with. So I had to spend a while finding like another person that could be the CRO. And once I found that person, I still hadn't told my partners. But I think once that person was ready and I could see it, it's almost like you can replace yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing a founder has to do. They have to make it so that they're replaceable.
Oh, of course.
And so you have to pass those relationships. And soon you very quickly realize that everyone is better at doing their individual job than you are. Yeah. So the manager was much better at managing people than I were. Yep. The individual salespeople were betting at selling. Maybe together you're pretty good at doing all of them. But I think it was once I saw that and my feelings hadn't changed that I knew, and also with your partners too. Like we grew up as best friends, so once you start like that, sometimes as you're going through that, the relationship changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think I realized, there'll be like a year where, it might be like, wow, we didn't expect this, but very quickly I knew that just kind of give it some time and the relationship will kind of go back to not business. And I think I was so fortunate to be in that position because working with my best friends, they were able to tolerate me, and everyone has their like idiosyncrasies or quirks or the way they work. And so I don't think I would ever be in the tech world if I didn't start this with people that were starting alongside with me and were good with that. But I think the biggest thing was like, how do I grow and how do I take those skills to something else? So there's a lot that happened in BloomNation we can kind of talk about, but it was just an amazing experience. The company is doing great. But I think the other thing is from a entrepreneur financial perspective, when you have two great partners like I did, and I think it's time to put another horse in the race, because the way that I look at it is tech companies all have the ability to go billion or bust, and so it's like a poker tournament. And so, wanted to maybe enjoyed the building process, and so was excited to do that. But yeah, there's a lot that went there that was incredibly helpful because again, take business school.
Yeah.
I was kind of just like, wow, business school is like totally just like a classroom exercise. Like
Sure.
I haven't been sued before. I haven't had people yell at me. I hadn't had to fire people.
Yeah.
I haven't had seen people cry. I haven't had that feeling of seeing that bank account and like camaraderie. So the real world just excited me.
Well, you touched on something. I think it happens with most entrepreneurs, right? Because usually when you're an entrepreneur, you start with a passion for something, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're like solving a problem or you're just got a real serious interest or passion in something. And for me, that was SEO, right? I just kind of got into it. Like I said, I was doing SEO for poker companies, and like I would like geek out over like reverse engineering strategies and figuring out what can I do differently to have a competitive edge, right? And and then from there, one thing leads to another, and now like people see that you're good at this and they want you to do that for them, right? And so that was the genesis of the agency. And then next now I'm not spending so much time like geeking out over like link building and whatnot, and now I'm having to do accounting or HR or right. And then you start to kind of do things, and next I'm not a SEO anymore. I'm a CEO, right? Yeah. And so I don't know how to be CEO. So what do? I get a coach to help me how to be CEO, right? And so yeah, there is all of that. I think every entrepreneur kind of goes through that, but eventually, if you're good at it, you end up finding people that are much smarter than you at the specific roles that you're not really good at or you're not passionate at, and that's kind of the secret for success.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't scale a company yourself,
No.
So
it's impossible. Okay. So BloomNation, now branded as what?
Promenade Group.
Promenade Group. You still have an interest in that, but you have been working on a new venture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think in this segue, I'm going to use the restroom.
Okay.
Is that a good segue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Go.
I was like,
Yeah.
we're going to jump into it. This is a good place to cut.
Yeah.
You also have another bottle of water, don't you?
Absolutely. I'll get you one.
Great job.
Thanks, guys.
Everything's looking phenomenal.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Sound good?
Everything sounds great.
All right.
Good.
Do clear.
Yeah, fairly easy to use.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. I like
Get in
it.
the swing of it.
That's crazy. 21 is one of my favorite movies, man. That's crazy.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You guys good? Everything's golden.
Perfect,
man.
man. Perfect.
Thank you.
We're going to pick up. He just had to use the restroom.
Yep,
So.
that's what I thought. So
Mhm.
cool.
Thank you, Chris.
That's wild.
Yeah, no, I remember when that movie came out also.
Yeah, man. Jim Sturdy.
Yep.
Did you get to meet the actors? Like,
Oh, yeah. I was there with them all, and yep. It was they had stand-ins for people, and then eventually they came. But interesting enough, Scott Schrum, whom went to school. He was there the same time as that group, the MIT group. Yeah, they've got like a name, but
It's running a little long, which is okay. We
Yeah.
can cut it.
no,
Just
I
because
I'm gonna I just wanted to kind of get into
Definitely
Whippy a
hear
little
about
bit.
Whippy.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna go into the heart to heart,
Yeah.
and then that'll be that.
Yeah,
So.
you don't have to do all of them. However many. You need.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're good. Good episode.
Good stories.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, he surprised me.
Yeah, poker players are always really interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's definitely
The
something that-
psychology, like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, they're reading the room
Yeah.
right there.
He's like internalized.
It's like he's watching what my hand goes and
Yeah.
what, you know what I mean?
picking up on all the key.
Exactly.
You ever drink the yerba mate tea?
No.
No, really? Oh, if you like that tea, then
Is-
you'll love
Yeah.
the yerba mate.
Is that like a Greek tea or something, or
It's
is it like in a yellow can?
it's in a yellow can.
Yeah. I've seen it, but I haven't drank it. No,
Mhm.
it's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was drinking like energy drinks and stuff prior, and then I started drinking these, and it
Okay.
gives you that kick, you know what I mean?
Got it.
I switch off, man. I love coffee. I love caffeine.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Coffee transition to tea in the afternoon,
Uh huh.
can't stop.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
My day does not go well if I don't have coffee.
Really, I'm surprised you guys haven't.
My day doesn't go well if I do have coffee.
Yeah, huh? You're the opposite.
Up all night. I love the taste. I'm just caffeine sensitive.
Same. I do too.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
There we go.
I was like, I paused. I don't know how video production works. but
Oh,
I was
they
like, I was like, you gotta.
everything.
I was like, this is a good time just to pause for a
Yeah.
second. Because I've had to actually talking about Loom.
Mhm.
Have you guys ever used Loom?
Yeah.
I love you, Loom. Yeah.
But now I have to sometimes edit the looms.
Uh-huh.
So it's got me thinking like anytime you're gonna have to stitch it together. Because
Yeah.
Loom is like basic. It's like how we
It-
use Canva when other people use harder. I was like, I have to pause.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I don't ever. I'm a one-shot guy on Loom. If I mess up, I just keep going. I just go
That's
with
good.
it. Yeah,
So
it
you
is what it
mentioned
is.
Whippy, and that's where we.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know.
So I'll just kind of feed you the question again. So you now have a new venture called
Whippy.
Whippy. Okay,
Yeah.
I want to know where that name come from, but I also want to know a little bit more about this venture. So.
Yeah. So left BloomNation kind of right as COVID was taking hold.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think even before I jump into there, that was probably the most adverse year for me.
Okay.
So I know a lot of people went through highs and lows during COVID, but when you're starting a business and you're like looking at a white wall and you were at a company of 100 people and now you're trying to figure out, and you don't even have the idea, you just, your intuition or gut said you just got to start something new.
Yeah.
It's a pretty trying time. So I'm there and trying to figure it out. And we started walking actually around to different vendors because that's just what I knew. Like go talk to a lawyer, go talk to a dentist, try to figure out what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I didn't really have the right idea. I started testing stuff, but it was at that time actually that there was an engineer that was at BloomNation that I was really fond of,
Mm-hmm.
and that we, chatted a lot. And he was actually working there. He actually, believe it or not, was from Ireland
Mm-hmm.
and happened to become a 1-year program at UCLA. So just really was excited with what we were doing. And so I remember when I was leaving, his name is Jack Kennedy.
Okay.
He was like, you know what? I'm finishing my, my master's in mechanical engineering, but I just love this entrepreneur stuff. Like, I want to stay. I was like, you don't want to finish, because he was just here for 1 year. You don't want to finish what you're doing.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'll give it up. Like he's just like all cylinders, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember thinking about it, and I was like, because it happened to be that he wasn't a full-time. He was just kind of like here at UCLA and somehow got paired up with us. He'd seen some job posting, was like, hey, he was just like, I want to work for a couple months while I'm here, 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I got to be honest with you. If you're doing that for me, I'm actually leaving the company in 2 months. I'm going to announce it. So he happened to be one of the first people that knew.
Okay.
And he's like, no, I actually really wanted to work with you, even though you're sales and you're the talkative one. and I'm more interested in engineering. I kind of just liked your approach and how you worked with people. And so now during that year, fast forward to the next year, where I'd already left BloomNation and I was he happened to email me from Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm about to graduate this year and love to just like, especially shoot the shit with you.
Yeah.
Just see what you're up to, because once I graduate, there are a lot of people that say this, but I really have the entrepreneurial itch. And so that was in 2020 and happened to be kind of just like finding my own purpose, so to speak, you could say.
Okay.
Testing different ideas. And so probably one of the best things that happened to me was that email he sent me.
Wow, he took action.
He did,
right?
and I tell you something right now, like, so he's my partner now. I've just never seen someone take action at this level. And he's 25, So,
Wow.
so so that segues to the next part. And so we started experimenting with ideas. He had graduated that summer of 2020, and he was like, I'm gonna come back to LA. He loved LA, loved California, but of course, like, you just couldn't at that time talk about it. So it was a difficult time, because the person I actually thought like, okay, let's try to start some stuff, couldn't come over. I couldn't go walk into businesses anymore. So someone who's an extrovert and like loves people, it was difficult, like being stuck in an apartment and staring at a wall.
Of
So
course.
you struggled a lot. Like, to be honest with you, that year, tried a couple different ideas, and I just didn't. I left my company. It was a different type of wake up. Like I woke up when I was at BloomNation. I just wasn't, I didn't feel the purpose. Here it was just like, what am I gonna do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that year, probably the best thing that could happen to me, because all of a sudden you had to like figure out your finances. Like, I was coming from a poker world where like there were some times in the poker world where like I would wake up and I would realize, oh shit, there was $500 in that pocket in the washing machine. So you had no structure, you know what I mean? And so BloomNation prepped me for some of that, but I had to take control of everything. And so it was probably the hardest year I've had that I can remember.
Wow.
Because, and you wake up, but having Jack there, it just like, I was going through ideas, and this is a good chance for someone to jump ship on you. You know what I mean? Even if they want to work with you. And it seemed to like get him more excited. Motivated, yeah. And so we started looking at stuff like web platforms. We were looking at an on-demand staffing app that we could build. There was just a bunch of stuff we kind of looked at.
So you didn't have an idea for a business yet. You guys are just brainstorming. Wow.
Well, we were doing what you probably know, which is like faking it till you make it.
Yeah.
So like go with an idea and call vendors, and like, this is maybe me honing on the Persian side. Pretend you actually have it. So you have to, like, one of the smartest tests someone ever told me in business was someone who, I think eventually one of his friends had exited a company very quickly for a couple $100 million, and it was an e-commerce idea. But to see if it actually worked, he just made a quick Shopify website for $50.
Sure.
And anyone who purchased, they just said sold out.
Yeah.
But he just wanted to know if he ran ads, like how many people would have purchased that theoretical product. And he just proved it to himself. So I think that first year we were trying to prove something to ourselves. And I mean, we weren't doing bad. Like, we had one business that was making, something that you could pay yourself. But I left BloomNation to re-energize and to try to make a $1 billion company. That was the thing. Like, I wanted, you're hungry for it, And so finally, towards the end of that year, one of my friends, my best friend, the one I mentioned in poker, I went into his office and it was just like a mess. Like, they were not following up with leads. They weren't, tracking things. Like, when someone needed someone, it wasn't going to the right person. So I kind of started looking at that. And then I had a friend of mine who was actually in staffing, and he was using like text message, but he wanted to use automation. Like, he wanted, if someone texted and said, how do I apply? Just automatically send them the job link. Why are my employees manually doing that?
Sure.
And, if I need to send it to 1,000 people, I want the software to know who opened the job application link and automatically just remind the ones that didn't. Like, functional things that people spend a lot of time doing, and just
so much time.
Like, automated.
Yeah.
And so Jack, again, I was still working on another idea with together, and he's like, hey, I'm just gonna try building something, and it's been a year, so it's gone very quick. It's been a year since we started this, and now we have hundreds of customers, which is awesome. And at this point, I don't know if that's scalable, right?
Yeah.
Sell everyone and onboard everyone myself and probably back to working crazy hours again.
Yeah.
But when you didn't have it and you were just going through like, what is it?
Yeah.
The second you grasp something, you're more likely to just like want to go. And I think if I left BloomNation and I just had that, I would just think like I'm a king on a chair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you had to kind of fail fast to just like get that hunger again.
Sure. Well, you sound like you're the person. It's kind of like me. Like you like agile environments, right? Where you can kind of just quickly shift and change and not have to go through all the bureaucratic red tape every time you want to kind of have like implement an idea. And it seems like that kind of drives you a lot more, and why you kind of like that world of chaos, I guess, if you will. Really,
For
right?
sure.
Yeah. So it's would you call it? It's just an SMS automation solution. Is that kind of what Whippy is?
I think we're moving so quick that we don't necessarily. I mean, I would say we're like, so right now, Whippy's focused like on text messaging and a bunch of different use cases. Like, you know, for the example of the lawyer, the PI lawyer, what did they want? So I just started watching them.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of Facebook ads, you know.
Yeah.
And they wanted the software, or they wanted so what they were doing before was having to download a spreadsheet and spend a lot of time. And so we're like, okay, let's integrate this with Facebook ads. Let's text the person that was in the accident. And if they don't respond, let's text them this, and this. You know what I mean? Let's do things so that like your team doesn't have to.
Sure.
And then in the case of staffing, I kind of went over it. There were even like doctors, like in the cosmetic space, like orthodontists, people in plastic surgery.
Yeah.
That were like all about ROI. And they're like, so Whippy is really an automation and it uses some AI. It's really cool, but specifically in text, but I don't think that's the long-term vision. I mean, I think there's so many different communication things, like being able to understand how you email people or be able to transcribe calls. I mean, there's a lot of different things that in the end, it's the customer that they're all getting touched.
Yeah.
And so I think if you bring that together, it just becomes very powerful. But I think we're lucky enough to find something, to be honest with you, that people are willing to pay for from day one. So I think if you're going to dream big, you can dream big. But unlike BloomNation, where we raised 25, this one I decided to bootstrap. Because when you do raise a lot of money, it's awesome. Like you get to have an office. And I was enamored by that. You know, like you make an office and where is the table, the glass conference room? Like they actually, physically, our landlord at the time on the promenade was like, I'm thinking about redoing this anyways. How would you guys want to build it? We made our own WeWork.
Oh, wow.
But the downside is that money is kind of still held, or those rules, or you owe to investors. It's not like you can just go put that money in your pocket. And I think now I'm more hungry to put that in my pocket.
Got it. And it's just you and Jack right now, or you have more staff?
So we have so I started a little bit differently. Started off with myself, Jack, and 4 engineers.
Okay.
So Jack first, then 4 engineers. So unlike we're at BloomNation, we outsource the engineering. You come from a different perspective where it's all engineers in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
But now we have been adding some salespeople, some kind of account managers, and yeah.
And one last question, Whippy, was that where did that come from?
Yeah, so I don't want to say my dog, because really with my mom and my brother got a Whippet. Have you ever seen a Whippet? They actually have it here. It looks like this, you know.
Oh, the dog,
like a little greyhound. But the thing about it is that I was literally sitting there, and this is no joke, thinking of ideas, and I was like, as I was kind of starting with where we were going, like, you got to see this Whippet. It's the fastest dog I've ever seen. Yeah. Super, like, just like a dart, right? And I was like, we have to think of a name. And I was like, Whippy. He's a Whippet. Yeah. And that guy is straight and fast and just full of energy. So we didn't want to make, I'm not big on like, because your idea for a product is to be bigger than just text messaging. Or like in the case of BloomNation, bigger than just flowers. So I think Whippy was just a cool name that can really mean anything. That's awesome.
Sometimes when you ask the universe gives back. And that happened with me recently. I wrote a book. It's called Law Firm SEO. And it's specifically for lawyers that want to do marketing with digital, right? But then I wanted to write another book that was kind of catering like to everybody else. That's not just lawyers. And so I couldn't think. I'm like, it has to be 2 words. What could I come up with? And I was throwing out names. I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like that. And so I've got a couple books, and one of them is called Words That Sell. And so I'm like, let me just kind of grab one of these books just to kind of see. So I literally opened it up, and the first word that I saw was honest. And I'm like, that's exactly what I want is, because there's so many people that are snake oil salesmen in the world of SEO. I'm like, I just want honesty. And that's what this book is about. And so now it's called Honest SEO. And so that book comes out. But like I said, similar stories. Sometimes you just kind of ask the universe and it gives you back, right?
Yeah, for sure. No.
Well, I think in maybe 3 or 5 years, you'll come back as maybe a billionaire with this project, hopefully, knock on wood. But I want to wrap up with something that we call Hennessey Heart to Heart. It's where I just ask you questions, and then you just kind of rattle off the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Simple. What was your favorite subject in school?
I would say math.
Math. That's what I thought. Yeah. Which of the 5 senses would you say is your strongest?
Probably vision.
Vision? Okay.
I need to see things.
How many languages do you speak?
Questionably 3.
What are the 3 languages?
I speak English. Yekem Farsi sobat mikonam. So that's Persian.
Okay.
Y hablo un poco español.
Okay, got it. I speak 1. What is your proudest accomplishment?
That's a good question. I think if I was to think recently, probably the first poker tournament I won when I was going through that, and I was just like, I remember actually getting a little emotional.
Yeah.
So I would say, the World Series of Poker obviously is huge, and raising that money and starting a company. But if I was to give you a curveball, probably like that first poker tournament.
The first poker tournament where you came home to mom.
Yep.
Got it. What makes you laugh the most?
Prank calling people. Or now actually, like I told you with my mom, as funny as I said, like we will use Whippy to send out these texts to family members.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm actually going from here to a rehearsal for my cousin's wedding.
Yeah.
So I sent it pretending to be the wedding coordinator.
That is awesome. You gotta share some screenshots so
Yeah.
that we can include it in the post of responses.
One of my cousins is pretty sure that the wedding coordinator is hitting on him. So.
Oh, really? That's awesome. I love it. How would your friends describe you?
I think, to a certain degree, like, I understand people. So I asked someone that recently, and like, what's the good and what's the bad?
Mm-hmm.
And he just said, like, when you're selling people or when you're connecting with people, I think, like, some degree of emotional intelligence is pretty important. So I think I connect well with people.
Okay. I would agree. Aside from poker, what sport do you watch on TV?
I watch actually a lot of soccer. I don't watch that much poker.
No.
I'll watch it once in a while, but I can't wait for the World Cup. I'm watching right now. And again, I'm like everyone else where I watch the YouTube 10-minute
the
version
synopsis of the games and stuff. Yeah.
But I love to watch soccer.
What's your go-to karaoke song?
I can't even think, but I just remember that when I was rushing a fraternity at Berkeley, we had to sing Cyndi Lauper's "What Is It, Girls Want to Have Fun." So I really can't go past that.
If you had all the money you could ever desire, what would you do all day?
I think almost everyone who's successful, and I'm not saying that I'm there yet, but like my dad showed me this. My dad is in his mid-70s, and he still wants to work. So I think even if I had all the money in the world, like, would love to find ways to probably give most of that away. Yeah. But I think I would still want to have purpose. Yeah. If I lose that and I'm just like, hey, this is awesome, I'm on vacation all the time. Yeah, I'll get old. Depressed quick. Of course, anybody would. Yeah. Sometimes it's just passing along the wisdom to the younger generation and teach them the way, right? That's true. But I got to keep it. I learned in poker that if you just step back and you don't still play the game, you're not going to be teaching for long.
Sure. Yep. Do you have any pet peeves?
I think the one in terms of like business that like I kind of look to hire is you just like poker, you never took anything personal, you know?
Mhm.
Like we used to relish to go to someone and say like, how would you play this hand? They wouldn't tell you because they think you're going to take their money.
Yeah.
So we were always open to feedback because we needed it.
Mm.
But I think one peeve on the business side was it was just hard to find people that truly were open to taking feedback. And so I remember in the beginning when I was the manager and we cut that pretty quick, there'd generally be crying sessions coming out there. So we found professional managers who probably had a lot more could go through the process and had the time. But even when we had those managers, it was like I had a pet peeve with people that just weren't open. I wouldn't say being criticized, that's not the right way, but on like really trying to improve. And I think this last year taught me even for myself like how vital self-improvement is.
People open to constructive criticism.
Yeah, and I think it starts with yourself. So and that's very cliche. I don't want to get like that vibe going, but I think you have to first like look at yourself. And so I think that's a big thing. Like people that are just not willing to do that, I think that...
Oh, it starts from you.
Yep.
Yeah. I totally agree. Favorite type of ethnic food?
That's good. I like that. Food we like. So I like Thai. I love pizza. I love like Thai. I think recently my mom and a bunch of my family are vegetarians. So we've gone to some amazing like vegan Thai places. And I mean, we're Persian. We love kebab. We love that stuff. But I think recently Thai has been one of my favorites. Spicy Thai.
I love Persian food, man.
I love
Like,
Persian
who
food.
doesn't,
Yeah,
right? Yep. So good. Favorite childhood memory?
The first one that comes to mind right now is just like, you know, we talked about Rolo, who's a whippet. But when I was a young kid, I had a Great Dane. And the Great Dane was like larger than me. And so I've been told, I mean, I don't really remember it, but like that I was falling in the pool and that, like this Great Dane was huge. And so the Great Dane literally, I mean, the Great Dane is, 7 feet tall.
Huge.
But actually like grabbed me and my parents came. So
Is that right?
yeah.
Wow. When were you the most disappointed in yourself?
That's a good question. I think, I don't know if it's disappointed, but again, I think this like last year and a half starting a new company, I actually had a couple other friends who left their companies and they weren't as fortunate. Like I think they're still going through a cycle. And so I think maybe the first couple months trying to like, need a little encouragement or whatever. Like entrepreneurs don't need that. Like poker players don't need that. So I think there was a little bit of a disappointment in maybe things not working out as fast enough, but that's life. And so you just have to somehow keep faith,
Oh, yeah.
So I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, sometimes entrepreneurs or people that kind of are perceived to be successful, there's a lot of things that are going on in the background that,
Oh, for sure.
Like they're not as vulnerable.
And I think the more successful they are, the more they had to go through shit.
Yeah. Yep, because they've built up this perception and they have to keep that facade, right? Yeah. Last question. In what way do you want to contribute to making the world a better place?
That's a very broad question. So I don't even know where to start there, but I think the one place I've learned that my parents, if I just go back to the world, is like how important respect is for other people. So whether it's, you sometimes get tried, it's same in poker. I'll use that now. If you don't respect your opponent, they're going to crush you. So you have to be open. But I think if I don't even know where to go with save the world, but I think one really important thing with like empathy is to myself to continue to be more and more empathetic. But I think, no matter it's your intern, your waiter, or your boss, like I think having some ability, like in poker, and maybe this is a good way to leave it, like you have to put yourself in the other person's shoes and like actually think of how they're going to play the hand to kind of outplay them. And I think more and more people, including myself at times, need to put themselves in someone else's shoes to really be there. And so I think that's something that from a holistic perspective, I would implore on other people. I don't think it's gonna,
No, I think it does change the world. It's just because it's contagious, right? And if you're rude to a waiter, right, just because you classify yourself on a different level as them, you know what I mean? Like, that's not living life, right?
No. And I think culture in a company as you build it is like the most vital thing. Because I told you in the end, everyone becomes better at you at that individual thing.
That's right.
But why should they work? Or your customers, why should they refer people? Why should people? And it's like ends up being you. And I think the more and more you start to put yourself in their shoes in every single way, it's hard to do that. Like the better you make the people around you. So
yeah, good way to look at life. Well, David, it's been awesome having you on the show. I appreciate you coming down here to the studio. How can my listeners keep up with you and learn more about Whippy? Yeah,
so the website is Whippy, WHIPPY.ai. Pretty simple. So Whippy. And my email is just david@whippy.co. You can just email me there.
Yeah,
I should actually, as I'm saying this, probably add a david@whippy.ai. So I probably will soon.
There you go. And if they want to watch any of your poker videos, I'm sure there's stuff on YouTube
Yeah,
too.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for stopping by, my friend.
Of course. Thank you for having me, guys. Enjoyed it.